before we do any work for tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, we need to strip out these flexors, warm them up. So when we go into the individual fibers, the tendons of the common extensor muscles and flexor tendons, it won't be as uncomfortable. You'll eliminate a lot of the trigger points, a lot of the fascial adhesions, just by doing a slow, deep stretching all the way through the wrist and into the hand. You'll notice that I have Hank's palm up, and I'm starting at the crease of his elbow. I sink in with the pads of my fingers as deep as it will let me go, and then I just do a slow stripping out to both sides. I go about 1 little inch at a time, stripping out. This opens up the flexors, reducing the tension, and also bringing those flexor muscles to resting length. Most of the issues people have in their elbow and in the wrist are due to overuse and misuse. Too much flexing and too weak extensors. So for the extensors, we're going to turn the hand over. Again, because of all the flexing that we do, that shortens and contracts these muscles in here, overloading these tendons out on the extensor side. So when we do the extensors, we're going to go do the stripping from the wrist to the elbow. On the extensor side, we're going to do deep stripping from the wrist to the elbow, nice and slow, starting in the middle, in between the ulna and the radius, and stripping out. My left hand is going laterally, my right hand is going medially, all the way up into those tendons. And then I'm just going to bend his elbow, hold his hand. I'm doing a handshake, and I'm going to supinate and pronate his hand as I do a stripping from the radius across those flexors. And relax. It's a deep stripping. You can go all the way up the arm, or down the arm rather, from superior to inferior on the extensors. Just get in between, try to get those adhesions in between the bones, anywhere you feel trigger points or high fibrotic knots. Of course, you can use some movement. Just supinate, pronate. That will create the heat. You create the friction. Do the same thing on the other side. Deep stripping. Starting at the flexor tendons and rolling over to the extensors. It's kind of like an Indian burn, but of course an Indian burn is superficial. We're going deep and slow, as deep as the muscles will let us go. There may still be some tension in the forearm. We use a technique called the popsicle stick, and it's a medical term for it. We're just going to hold the arm so the heel of your hand is one on the radius, one on the ulna, and then my fingers on the extensor side are in between the bone. As I push and pull, I try to separate them, pulling in different opposite directions. Kind of like you're breaking off a popsicle, breaking it in half. And go from the elbow to the wrist. You can jostle it a little bit. That feels like it gets deeper into that inner osseous membrane. At this point, if their main complaint had either been at the common extensor tendons or at the flexor tendons on the medial side, I would test that against resistance to see if we can identify any specific area of discomfort. We always want to do this after you warm them up, because if they came in complaining of discomfort in that area, just what you've done so far could have taken care of the problem. But if we need to get more specific, we need to find out where the areas of dysfunction are. So I'm going to have Hank extend his wrist just a little bit for me, and then I'm going to give him some resistance and extend it a little bit further if you can. And relax. Is there any discomfort in their area? Okay, if there were, and go back to multi-directional friction, trying to realign those fibers. Really important that once you get these fibers realigned and the flexors and extensors balanced out, that if they have chronic tennis elbow problems, that they start strengthening these extensors and stretching the flexors. On the medial side, if he had been complaining of specific discomfort in this area, I would have him just flex his wrist against my resistance, and usually that will reproduce some discomfort right at that tendinous, those tendinous attachments on the medial side. And again, just after you've warmed up, do some multi-directional friction. Try to get a good angle here for you. Wherever they point to where that specific area of pain, that's where those muscles or tendons have been strained. And always try to retrain using just gentle resistance. So bend your wrist back and just have you flex it. I'm just going to give you a little bit of resistance with my fingers and relax. And then we'll do a flexor stretch with a tractioning of the wrist and then extension of the wrist. This is a flexor stretch, also great for carpal tunnel syndrome. It's a good habit to get into to stretch out these shortened and contracted flexors.